It's hard to say exactly when I knew the end was coming. Was it the first time I saw it? Was it the last? Somewhere in between? Regardless, I knew the end was almost upon me. The first time I ever laid eyes on it, I was a young kid, right on the edge of the woods near my house. When I was a kid, I loved to play outside, making up stories, fighting imaginary beasts, and, obeying our one rule, stay clear of the woods. Me, being a trusting, not yet jaded adult, listened to that rule. However, one day, when I was about 10, the woods spoke to me. I couldn't properly hear what it said, but it seemed to call to me. So I took the first step into the woods. It was then that the cold seemed to wash over me. In an instant I was no longer in the warmth of my house, where my mother lay sleeping. Then I saw it. Its skin pulled tight against its bones, fresh blood dripping off its claws, a long back crooked and bent over, and its face. Oh God, its face. It had the face of a human. It seemed like a large mixture of things that should never be together, and yet there it was, together. It started to turn. A branch snapped underneath my foot, and, like an animal, the thing ran and vanished in an instant. I'm not sure if I was more unsettled by the way it moved, or how, for a moment, right before it ran, it seemed to look at me, look through me, and see beyond even what I knew of myself. Years would pass before I would see this beast again. I would eventually move out of my childhood house and away from the woods. I had mostly forgotten about the beast, but somewhere, deep inside, I could never forget the eyes boring into me for that split second. I moved to the city far away from the quiet and slow life I knew growing up. For a while, I loved it, the hustle and constant momentum. But eventually, I just wanted things to slow down. I found myself going to my local park more and more often, looking for that slowness I longed for. One night, when I was smoking in the park alone, I felt those eyes looking at me once more. I looked around, unsure of where the thing looking at me was. It seemed to be something peering through that cracks. That feeling of something looking at you despite knowing you are alone. Shortly after this evening at the park, I felt this desire to return back home. Or, at the very least, go back to the edge of the woods. So, the fool I was, I listened, and moved back to the woods. Being on the cusp of the wilderness, however, did wonderful things for my art. I felt inspired for the first time in years. Since I was a teenager, really. I made art of monsters, horses out of hell, beasts that had previously only prowled in my mind, the monsters I felt in the city, now able to be put to paper. The one thing that I never got to accurately put to paper, however, was the gaze I felt at that night in the park, or the eyes I saw when I was a young boy. Then it came again, the calling. The voice I heard coming from the woods now in clarity, like a tune stuck in the back of your head, but you can never quite complete it, reaching its conclusion. And once again I listened to my muse from the deep. I wish I had just stayed in bed, ignoring the call of the beast. But, alas, I did not. I went outside, and now I know the truth. Have you ever heard of a cognito hazard? It becomes a danger just by knowing of it, thinking of it. As soon as you become aware of the beast, it becomes aware of you. I became aware when I was a child, and it never left me. Haunted me for years. Hunted me for years. Every call back to the woods was the beast, longing for my return only to devour me, dear listener. But the beast still had use for my voice. One last thing to mimic, to make more aware of the voice from the woods.